Well, see, I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Born in March 18th, 1944. I don't remember too much about childhood and that, but I know, the family I was brought up in, we were did attend churches, church all the time, Sunday school. So my values were did very little lying or anything, and I think I was a pretty good child. But I got more into basketball. I loved to play basketball, so I always was down at the park playing basketball. Whether there was anybody else there to play with or not, it didn't matter. I could shoot around and play by myself if I had to, and even if it was raining, the minute the rain stopped, I was on my way to down to the park and playing some basketball. So I even played basketball down in the basement, come to think about it. I had a little ball and I'd set up my own little basket down there. Of course, wasn't much, couldn't loft it too high because of the ceiling, but grew up with 3 brothers. One of them was a lot older, so therefore he wasn't around too much. And he was 12 years older than me, but the other 2 were there. And then as time went on, I started working out at the Fort Wayne Country Club as a caddy. I probably started there when I was 11 or 12 years old. When I was 16, I became the caddy master out there, which meant I took care of giving the caddies their jobs and paying the caddies. The members would pay me and I'd pay the caddies and that, but a lot of the jobs was calling caddies and trying to get them to come in to work, but didn't have too much trouble with that. When I was caddy master out the country club, I went in and told my boss one spring, I said, I'm not going to be back this year, Louis. I said, a buddy of mine told me where I can make a lot of money with one of these ice cream, selling ice cream. They had bicycles where you pedaled around town and they sold ice cream, but since we were 16, we'd be able to have a motorcycle. So I said, so I thought, wow, this sounds really great. Of course, he told me, he said, I don't think you're going to do that well. He said, I'll bet you'll be back here in 2 weeks. So he said, I'll save your job for at least 2 weeks. So I started my new job. I ran out of gas once and had to push the motorcycle to a filling station. And then I had all these kids hanging all over it, couldn't get them off. So I lasted 2 days and I went back to ask my boss if he still had my job there at the country club. And he said, yeah, I do. I said, well, can I have it? He said, 2 days. He said, wow. He said, I thought you'd at least last a week. He said, it was pretty quick. I said, didn't work out like I thought it would. After high school then, I was just kind of waiting for the draft. I assumed I was 18 years old. I had my physical and I went down and took tests for the Air Force, was going to join, but decided, nah, I think I'll just wait for the draft. So in the time there, I had all kinds of jobs. I worked at the gas company for the summer. Then I worked at BF Goodrich for about 8 months and didn't like working in a factory or working nights, so I went back to the gas company for temporary help and worked there for about 3 months. And then my brother and a couple friends, we decided we were going to get in the car and head to California, so we went out there and camped on our way out, camped on our way back, and I don't know how long we were out there, probably about 3 weeks. But then when I got back, I got a job at Krudsky's warehouse, which also doesn't exist anymore. And I was offered a permanent job, but I was going on nights again, and I wasn't going to work nights. And besides, I knew I was going to get drafted, but no draft. So I went to work for Sears warehouse, and that didn't work out either, so I had a chance to get back to the gas company, so I went back to the gas company again. And then later on, I don't know how old I was then, it was after I met my wife, but I went to school in Kansas City, which was had to do with airlines, which mainly was ticket agent or doing something like that. I was offered a job with American Airlines in Chicago, but decided not to take it because of the cost of living there and what I was going to get paid. So came back to Fort Wayne and ended up with a job with Lake Central Airlines in Marion, at the Marion Airport, which you pretty well did everything there with. You were the man that loaded the baggage and took the baggage off and just about everything. But once again, this job involved a lot of time, so I decided that wasn't for me either. So went back to the gas company again, worked temporary. But then, since I hadn't been drafted, and I met my wife, and we decided to get married, and so then I had to get a permanent job. So once again, I went back to the gas company. Of course, they got to know me pretty good. Even the doctors knew me pretty good. Every time I went in for a physical, they knew who I was. They'd say, "Oh, you're back again, huh?" But so I ended up at the gas company and worked there 39 years then. So.
I was born in Bryan, Ohio, October 25th, 1944. And my father was, he was overseas. It was during World War II. And when he came back home, my parents divorced. And he took my sister, and my mother took me. And when I was a year and a half, she put me up for adoption. And I was adopted by the woman that I consider to be my mother. And then she divorced the man she was with and married, when I was 5, she married the man I considered to be my father. And they were married, oh, quite a while. Anyway, as I grew up in Edgerton, Ohio, a small town, you could walk to school, you could walk anywhere, it was safe. And my main interest, probably from the time I was about in 6th grade, was singing. And when I was about 6 years old, I sang on the radio in Fort Wayne. We came over here, they had some program where kids could sing, so I came over here and I sang on the radio one Saturday. And when I was in 6th grade, I started taking voice lessons, and that was the main thing I enjoyed. I took voice lessons all the way through junior high and high school. I sang in a quartet of 3 girls, or 4 girls, and we sang in a little town. There's a lot of functions with the Rotary and different things like that. So every time there was a function where they needed entertainment, our quartet sang for that. And we sang at Buck Lake Ranch one year, which I don't know if that's still even around anymore, but we sang at Buck Lake Ranch, and Johnny Cash was there. So that was the first time I ever heard of him.
It's rolling around a bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. Yeah! But that train keeps rolling.
We did a lot of things with 4-H, and we sang at a lot of different 4-H events. When I was in high school, music was still my main interest. I was in the band, I played clarinet, and I sang at a lot of different things. I sang solos, I sang for weddings, I sang for a funeral once, and that was a disaster. I didn't want to do it, but I did it, and they said, okay, we're going to put you in another room and you'll be just fine, but then you can still hear the people crying. So I did that one time, I never did that again. That wasn't anything I ever wanted to do again. Graduated from high school in Edgerton, and I was accepted to Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, and that was pretty expensive, so the plan was for me to go to Cincinnati Bible Seminary for 2 years because the credits would transfer to the Conservatory of Music, and I would go to the Bible Seminary for 2 years, and then I would finish up my final 2 years at Cincinnati Conservatory, which sounded like a really good plan, except that when my freshman year was over, on the way, my mother was taking me back home, and she said that she and my dad were getting divorced, so there wouldn't be any money for anything, plus life was kind of chaotic. So I didn't go back to school. I didn't go back to college. I lived at home for a year and worked in a factory, which I despised. I just sat there and did the same thing all day long on an assembly line and thought, this isn't anything I want to do. So a friend and I moved to Fort Wayne, and she lived on Westbury, and she worked at St. Joe Hospital, and I had a job at General Telephone. And I didn't drive. I didn't get my license until I was like 22. And so I had to find rides to work, when I always managed to find them. But I worked at General Telephone, and I met, right after, about 2 weeks after I moved to Fort Wayne, I met Larry. And so I worked at General Telephone, and then I went to a place called Taxpayers Research, and that was right after we got married.
Back in those days, you used to get in your car, and you and your buddies used to ride around town. You'd go to Halls, and you'd just buzz through there, or you might stop and get a bite to eat. But then you went to, after you left Halls and Bluffton Road, you'd head to Azars on Calhoun Street there by Southside High School, and you'd drive through there. There was always a line of kids, you know, and then you'd go downtown, and Gardner's was downtown, so you'd drive through Gardner's and that. But anyhow, on the trip one time we were on, I believe it was Berry Street, and happened to see her and her friend, you know, and we just kind of yelled at them, and I don't know, we were talking to them, I don't know, and I guess I asked for her phone number and ended up calling her, and that's kind of how we...
Well, you pulled up beside us at the stoplight. You were driving, there was a car full of guys, and you pulled up and you said, "Hey, do you know your lights are on?" That's a strange pickup line.
Mama loves mambo. Mama loves mambo. Don't let her run.
We dated, we met like, well, his birthday's March 18th, and I met him like a week before his birthday. And we got married April 10th the following year. And we saw each other just about every day. Or in the evenings at least, and all weekend. Our dates were, he had friends, had a lot of friends, and they were dating, and so most of our time we would spend a lot of time with his friends and their girlfriends.
A lot of movies.
Yeah, a lot of movies. A lot of card games.
Sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The rest of them all lived at home. Everybody else except me, I had an apartment, so they would all come over to my apartment and we'd play games and do things like that.
I think we went out to eat that night, didn't we, to the gas house? And I think I proposed in Foster Park, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm, yeah. I liked the gas house, and so we went out to eat the gas house, and then you went to Foster Park and proposed to me.
Falling in love with you.
One kind of thing that was kind of interesting was that right before we got married, about a month before we got married, he took me out for lunch and from General Telephone, and he was taking me back to work, and somebody slammed into the side of our car and wrecked our car. And so we had to find another new car so we could, when we got married, we could have a car to drive. And then the other funny thing about it is that when I was pregnant the first time, about a month before the baby was due, we had another car accident, and it's like each time there was going to be a big event, we had a car accident. Brian was the first. At that particular time, it was just like it seemed like the main thing girls would do was graduate from high school, get married, and have babies. And I was almost 23 by the time Brian was born, so it took us a while to get pregnant. And it was amazing. I had wanted to be a mother for a very long time. I quit work when he was born, or right before he was born. And so I got to be home with him. And then not quite 2 years later, Craig was born. And I loved being a mom. I loved being home. I loved being with my kids. I loved raising the kids. And then we said 2 was enough. And then all of a sudden, there was Brady. But he's a blessing. I babysat a lot in high school, and I always really liked babysitting for little boys. I thought they were fascinating. And so when we had 3 boys, that was great with me. I was happy with that. I love little boys. I love their curiosity with bugs. And we would go fishing in the summertime. We'd go fishing. There used to be a fishing derby every summer, and I'd fill the car up with our boys and the neighbor kids, and we would go to the fishing derby every year. And I just loved being a mom. I loved summertime when they were school age. I loved having them home, and I was always lonely when they went back to school.
They talk, that talk. They stomp, that stomp. They surf, that surf. Yeah, they're out there having fun, surfing in the California sun.
Wildcat,
yeah.
Little League. But we lived in New Haven, and I was working part-time. I started working part-time, I think, when Brady was in maybe 2nd grade. And they rode their bikes. If they had Wildcat, they rode their bikes there. They rode their bikes to the Little League if they had to be there early, for practice or whatever. They would ride their bikes there. You just didn't take your kids a lot of places.
Oh, walk to school.
Yeah.
Well, there was a pool right down the street from us too, so
yeah.
Walk down there.
Yeah, there was, in the summertime, they were down at the pool. You'd give them a quarter to get in the pool and a quarter to make a craft, and they'd spend the whole day down there. They'd come back for lunch, and that was about it. But yeah, it was a great neighborhood to live in. Brady was our accident-prone child. When he was probably about 2 or 3, he was across the street at the neighbor's house. They had an above-ground pool with kind of like a walkway around it. And all of a sudden, the other kids came running home and said Brady fell off the side of the pool. And so we went over there to see him, and he was just laying there. And then he seemed to be okay, but we got the ambulance and took him to the hospital to make sure. They said the life jacket he had on had pretty much protected his neck. When he was probably just going into 1st grade, the neighbor girl was babysitting, and she was riding him on the handlebars of her bike, and he fell off and he slid across the pavement, and it kind of shredded his gum and knocked his teeth out, his front teeth loose. So I took him to the emergency room with the neighbor girl, and they questioned me very thoroughly.
And see, all our stories is about one. I guess the other 2, they'd probably say they were perfect, but that wasn't true.
We told our boys one time that if we had picked wives for them, we couldn't have picked better ones. Yeah.
And the kids there, with Brian, a couple of his was over in Germany for a few years too, so there was that separation, but we did get to make a couple trips to Germany too. So.
Yeah. We felt we were really fortunate that our kids lived so close. We have friends whose kids were in Missouri and southern Indiana, and by our kids living so close and our grandkids so close, we were able to do a lot of things with them.
we got Dylan. Say hi.
Okay, if you splash me, you will go under.
Oh, that was even better than having your own kids, because you could have them for a while and do whatever, spoil them crazy, and then send them back home.
In fact, that's what Craig always said. Whenever we had his kids, he said, "I'm going to have to go home and retrain them."
Yeah. We loved going to the different things they were involved in. I made an album of funny things they said. I wanted to keep a record of the funny things they said so I wouldn't forget them. And I think one of them, well, they were all funny, but my favorite one was when Haley said that her dad maybe married a woman from the Philippines. And she was probably about 5 or 6, and Kaylee would have been a little bit older, and Kaylee said, "Oh, those people are terrible." And so I said, "What do you mean? People from the Philippines?" She says, "Well, you know what they did to King David."
Philistines, I guess. So I always thought I remember one time when they had the seat belts and everything, and I didn't always fasten my seat belt. And Craig had really put that in the mind of his kids. You got to have a seat belt on. So, and Derek was pretty young, but we were leaving. Of course, I didn't have my seat belt on. Everybody was yelling at me, "Put the seat belt on." And Derek said, "Yeah, if you don't, you get picked up and police will take you in, and Grandma won't have Grandpa anymore."
We enjoyed the summers. Craig's kids came and stayed, and we started out with them going to Lifetime Sports Academy in the summertime, and then Derek and Dylan first, and then Gabe and Hannah, and then Addie and Megan. But they were here like from Sunday afternoon until Thursday night. We took them home. And that was a really neat time with the grandkids.
I think a lot of things we can talk through them, and I think we agree on a lot of things, but we usually talk through things. And I think probably the biggest thing is when I became a Christian, changed a lot of things in our marriage, and you know, when you got a wife that able to do everything she can do, kind of makes it easy too. So I don't know. I think talking through the things and having fun together, and we always have fun together when we're out. I just soon go places with her as go with anybody. So, you know, I have more fun with her than I do. So then,
I definitely think that having Christ in your marriage makes a huge difference, because we spent a few years when we were first married when we didn't go to church. And then, but we tried different churches, because I'd come from the Church of Christ and he was Lutheran, and we're trying to find a happy meeting ground. We tried Methodist and so forth, but we ended up going to Grace. It was New Haven Baptist at the time, and then we were both Christians, but we just weren't practicing our Christianity in our life. And when we both became committed to that, it made a huge difference. It made a huge difference in our relationship and with our parenting, because in the marriage relationship, I think it's probably because we desired to live our marriage as God wanted us to. Certainly not perfectly, but it was guidelines.
I guess for me, I just want them to know that I loved them, and that Mine would be that each and every one of them becomes a Christian, and that we'll be together again sometime. But I just want them to remember that I cared for them.
Yeah, I think I'd be the same with me. I wanted him to know that I loved him, and I wanted him to have fun. I wanted to have fun with him when we were together. I wanted him to have memories of things we did that were fun, so that, you know, hopefully they'd enjoy being with us. I want them to know that I'm a woman who loves the Lord. We've been immensely blessed. In so many ways, with our kids, with our grandkids, with our marriage. And you know, there's tough times in marriage, but
yeah, we went through a 8-month strike one time. Things were a little rough, but we made it through without any real big problems, other than a lot of health issues with parents.
I think that, you know, that the struggles can make you stronger as a couple, because I saw Larry work for minimum wage at jobs that I know he didn't like, but it fed us. It paid the bills. And he never complained. He just did it.